My name is Kirsten Sillis and this is my YouTube presentation for EDC1200, Self-Education and Society, on how might education mediate difference and dominance. The event or issue that I have chosen to look at will be the stolen generation. The Aboriginal people of Australia are said to have been in this country for over 50,000 years. In comparison, it is only in very recent times that European settlement occurred. The Aboriginal people have great cultural history and were known to have had at least 200 different languages spoken across the land. The European settlement and political power and dominance would soon change all of this. The stolen generation refers to an unforgettable era in Australian history when the Australian government ordered that Indigenous children of this land were to be taken from their families and placed into homes with white families or put into institutions. This started happening before an official government policy had been passed, the policy being dated from 1909 to 1969. The underlying idea here was to wipe out the Aboriginal population by integrating them with the white community and eventually causing the race to become extinct. So why did they do this? The answer is simply because they were different. According to the New Oxford American Dictionary, and in relation to difference in terms of identity, difference is classified as a point or way in which people or things are not the same, or the state or condition of being dissimilar or unlike. This comic here is a classic example of how the government felt about the Aboriginals' way of life on the land. For the European settlers that came to Australia, their many differences to the Aborigines encouraged them to display dominance and authority towards the natives. As the years progressed, the order by the government to remove Aboriginal children from their families was a way of showing their dominance towards the Aborigines, with a plan to slowly make them become as similar as possible to what the government considered normal. In February 2008, almost 100 years after children were taken from their families, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd issued a statement of apology to those affected by the stolen generation. He was the first Prime Minister since the White Australia policy was passed to officially recognise and apologise to the Indigenous people of Australia by acknowledging the sadness and devastation caused by actions of previous Australian governments. In this statement he said, "We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on these our fellow Australians. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country. For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry." Reconciliation between Australians has been a topic for several years. In 1991, the Commonwealth Government voted for and passed a Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation to be established. The aim of this council was to promote awareness for the Indigenous people of Australia and to establish reconciliation processes throughout the country. From this, Reconciliation Week was created and it runs from May 27th to June 3rd. These processes have been fed into the school systems to create a new and reconciled generation of Australians, which leads me into part 2 of this assignment. The event as curriculum. In order to teach students about difference in relation to the stolen generation, I would try to tie it in with the essential learnings of the Queensland Schools curriculum and National Reconciliation Week. My teachings are aimed at children in years 5 to 7, as the activities are based around more mature and deeper understandings. I would start off by having an informative discussion with the students and use slides to illustrate and demonstrate the information being discussed. This information session would only be short, maybe 5 to 10 minutes long in total. It would involve student participation in the discussion by simply asking students to raise their hands and respond to any questions. Introduction to the lesson. Using a slide as a visual guide, I would explain that this week is National Reconciliation Week and ask a few questions and write responses on the board. Examples of questions may be: does anybody know what reconciliation means? Does anybody know what Reconciliation Week is about? What were some of the differences that the European settlers saw between them and the Indigenous people of Australia? Or does anybody know what the stolen generation is all about? After taking down ideas from the class and noting them on the board, I would then play a slideshow that would answer the questions I had asked the students. The second part of the lesson would be to give children the opportunity to draw pictures of things that mean a lot to them in order to build an understanding of their identity. I would write examples on the board to help them with their pictures. Examples like pets, their home, parents, brothers and sisters, friends, school, or sport. Each child would be given a piece of butcher's paper. I would then ask the students to fold their piece of paper down the middle and write their name at the top of the column on the left. For this part of the activity, I would ask them to draw pictures of things that form their identity and things that make them who they are in the column under their name. The third part of the assignment would be developing an understanding of difference amongst their peers. Once everyone had finished their drawing, I would ask them to stand up and swap their piece of artwork with a classmate. Once they had done this, I would introduce the next activity, asking them to use their classmate's piece of paper and write their name at the top of the column on the right. They would then have to look at their classmate's column on the left and what they had drawn. I would now ask them to compare their identity with what they can see. They would then have to illustrate any differences and similarities that they have to their classmate by adding their own pictures in the column on the right. Once everyone was finished, they would then have to go and hand their piece of paper back to their classmate. The last part of the activity would be a reflection piece. The children would have to take their artwork home and use it for homework. At home, they would be required to sit and look at the differences that there are between the things that are important in their life compared to their classmates, and write about the important people in their life, or how they would feel if the things that they liked were taken away from them. This would all link in with several activities that would be set up throughout National Reconciliation Week to develop an understanding of difference and to create a foundation of understanding to discuss the stolen generation and how it affected the Indigenous people of this land. I would hope with this new understanding it would help to reduce any negative opinions and ideas that they might have had in regards to the stolen generation or towards the Indigenous people of Australia.